Welcome back to the Bonsai Builders podcast. I'm your host, Addison Galambos. We spend a lot of time on this show talking about the end game, reaching the pinnacle, exhibiting trees, and kind of high-level refinement. But today we're going to go back to level 1. My guest today is Dillon Clark. Dillon is a fellow hobbyist who has been practicing for around 4 years now, but really hit the gas pedal in the last 2. I see a lot of parallels in his journey to mine, and so I'm excited to talk with Dillon today. By day, he works in the video game industry, specializing in community building, and he used to be a YouTuber and streamer, so I'm sure I have a lot to learn from him. We're going to talk about his personal level up in bonsai. Sorry, by the way, for all the gaming puns. And we're also going to talk about how we can build a better community outside of the standard kind of monthly club meetings. So, Dillon, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Addison. Really happy to be here. I have been really enjoying this podcast. I think it's filled a unique kind of spot within my bonsai journey, and I'm really excited to be here.
That really means a lot to me. I think from what you've described yourself so far, like you're exactly the audience that I'm hoping to capture and make content with and connect with. So thank you again for reaching out and taking the time. Maybe let's start with your origin story. So, how does someone immersed in kind of the fast-paced world of video games and streaming find his way to the slowest art form on earth? Sure,
yeah. I think that contrast between the two worlds is maybe why I was drawn to it initially. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned there a little bit there. I'd spent, at the time whenever I first got my first tree, I had spent the previous 4 years as a full-time YouTuber and streamer, and then transitioned into working for a video game publisher, which is the position that I'm in now. And we were driving down the road with, I've got, 2 kids, and my oldest son saw a guy selling trees on the side of the road and said, let's stop and get one. And of course, it wouldn't be an origin story without mentioning the Karate Kid. I had watched the Karate Kid. I always thought that bonsai could be cool. So stopped. He was interested, and as a dad, any wholesome hobby that my son's into, I'm gonna jump into. So we get a tree, we bring it home, and it's just a little juniper, and we started doing research on, how to keep it alive, and, what we do next. And, as you do that research, you start seeing, businesses and stuff that pop up close to you. And there happened to be a Carolina bonsai vendor that was close to us, and actually in our neighborhood. And we called him. His name is Ken Hallett, and he talked to us for an hour, invited us to come over and check out his garden, and just we went over there, and when we saw his garden and the variety of trees and stuff, that's where it went from, okay, we have this little tree that we got along the side of the road, to, okay, we have an expert that is nice and will talk to us. He, mentioned the Triangle Bonsai Society, which is the club that I'm a member of now, and kind of opened the doors into the level of depth and how what the hobby can look like for you if you dive into it. So from that point, my son is maybe not quite as interested in it now as he was at that time. We had some fun. We made some YouTube videos and stuff like that, father son, just murdering our trees basically. But we did that. We had fun with it. He kind of, is on to other things, but it's really stuck with me.
I was going to ask you about that. At what point did your interest in bonsai kind of eclipse your son's?
Yeah. He was, for about a year, he was right there with me.
Wow.
But I think the nuance of the hobby doesn't really resonate with at that time, 10-year-old, 11-year-old. He was always excited to go get a new tree and to do big cuts and stuff like that. But the more nuanced, smaller tasks didn't really jump out to him. Wiring isn't something that he really enjoyed. But yeah, so about a year, he was in it full steam.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, I feel like, at least paralleling my journey, whenever I discovered bonsai as a child, it's something that keeps coming up for you over and over again throughout your life. And then once you're settled again, or in a position where you can take on some of these more, these hobbies that require stability and not moving and, all these things, then it kind of, and your maturity improves, right? Then it's then you can kind of jump back into it. So I'm sure that in the future, you guys will be doing bonsai again together as both of your kind of interests realign. So that's really cool to have, started that spark with him. and then
That's the
get to
dream.
revisit it in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I would love for these trees to pass on to him, but I know what a burden they can be as well. So if he's not into it, whatever, it'll be what it is. But hopefully, he'll keep at least one after I kick the bucket, and he'll have something that I touched and had an impact on that he can carry on.
Super cool. I think that's a good attitude. And yeah, they definitely can. There's definitely a lifestyle associated with
Yes.
bonsai. So can you tell me a little bit about your show that you just had? I'd love to understand, like, what kind of role you play within the Triangle Bonsai Society. And then, did you exhibit a tree at the show? Just curious, like, where you're at in your kind of exhibition journey.
Yeah, I did have a tree. So Triangle Bonsai Society just had our yearly show. We have it, if you're familiar with Duke University, they have on campus there, they have a really nice garden with an exhibition area. We have it in there, so we get a lot of traffic. It's a really nice club show. I've never been to another club show, but for me, it seems really nice, and it's always a joy to be there and just talk to people as they come through. They have questions, and it's something that I've really enjoyed. So yes, I did exhibit a tree. Funny story on that: the tree that I was planning to exhibit, I accidentally knocked off my bench about a week ago. So it broke the top branch off. It was just a little juniper procumbens. So nothing crazy, but it's the same tree that I displayed 2 years ago in the show. And I have improved the tree significantly since then. So I was kind of wanting to show that. And so once that happened, I had to sub in a different tree. It's actually a better tree, but I haven't owned it as long. It's a Toigawa juniper that's got some nice shape to it. But yeah, displayed that. But yeah, we have so much talent in our club. We have, at the recent ABS convention that was in Asheville, the Joshua Roth winner is in our club, Michael Ring. The artist that won Best of Show, Best Flowering, and People's Choice, Dane Smith, is in our club. He had a really cool tree there. Yeah, so much talent in our club, and the trees were just amazing. So mine definitely paled in comparison, and if anything else, being there, though, it really motivates you to want to take the next step. A big wake up call for me was when that tree broke, or when it broke, or, the top branch broke, and I had to pick another one. I was looking around my garden and I'm like, I only have one other tree in a pot right now. Everything else I have is in development. And I actually, in preparation for this, went and counted. I have 72 trees, and I have 2 in pots. The rest are all in like net pots or something like that. And again, kind of a wake up call to me, like, hey, I am now 4 years into this. I should have more stuff further along than this, in my opinion. And if, I shouldn't be struggling to find a tree that I can exhibit, in my opinion, after 4 years of this. I'm not saying that I should have the best tree there. I'm not saying that I should have, be winning awards or anything like that. But clearly, I have put way too much emphasis on the development aspect of the hobby, and maybe even fallen into a bit of a trap. Like, I'm going to grow my collection, and I haven't been focusing on getting trees into that refinement phase that I can learn that aspect about.
Yeah. We've talked about that concept a lot on the podcast. I think, like, as a hobbyist, having trees in differing stages of development, can accelerate your learning process. Right. So I think as early in your journey, there's kind of 2 pressures that are pushing on you that make it more likely that you'll have less in refinement. Right. One is, refined trees cost a lot of money, right? And so, like, before you decide to go all in, maybe you don't want to spend a lot of money on something that could potentially die, right? And then I think early in the journey, like, developing and like development techniques are kind of where you start with, like, the foundation, right? So I don't think it's a bad thing to have a lot of trees in development, but I think that similarly to what you found, like, you're going to do something like display a tree, and if you don't have a tree to display, then you're missing out potentially on learning things about bonsai related to display and accent plants and stands, right? And so, sometimes getting that early investment in something that maybe you're not quite ready yet for helps you, or like you might not be able to make the most informed purchase. So your purchase might not be, the smartest. It actually helps accelerate your learning journey, right? And hopefully gets you farther ahead in the future. So it's interesting that you're kind of seeing that within your own collection and taking a look at that.
Yeah, I think it's very easy. I'm sure there's a lot of people in my position that have kind of fallen into that. I'm going to, they look at a Mirai video and Ryan's working on a piece of material that looks nothing like anything that they have. So they're like, oh, I've got to grow everything. I've got to get everything bigger. I've got to, put everything in a net pot and just see how big I can get the trunk. And I think that something that has, that I've taken from a previous episode, and I think maybe you've mentioned it several times, is that kind of breakdown of maybe like the 3 pillars, or I don't know what the best term is for it, but when in our hobby, there's horticulture, there's the techniques, and then there's the artistry or the design aspect of it. And please correct me if I'm misquoting or anything here, or not getting it right. But I think if I could go back to year 1, Dillon, I would love to really say, hey, look at how much time you're spending on each of those pillars and make sure you're getting a little bit in each and trying to spread your time out amongst the 3 pillars, because it can be very horticulture heavy, I feel like, for beginners.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, do you think you have a specific, like one of those areas or one of those pillars is your particular strength? Like, do you like growing plants a lot? Right. And so like maybe you're more focused on the horticulture naturally. And then now that you're kind of taking a look at it, you're kind of adjusting to say, oh, like maybe I can't just lean into my strengths. I also need to practice my weaknesses or my blind spots. Do you think one of those particular areas is your strength and that's just like you kind of naturally fell into that rut, or do you think that's not the case?
I don't know if a strength would be what I would call it, as much as I think that it felt like I needed to be able to keep everything alive before I could go out and maybe spend a good bit of money on a tree. Like I felt like that was the foundation. Like at the bare minimum, even if your tree's ugly, let's keep it alive. And so I wanted to make sure I was doing that. And I think maybe I've gone a little too far or waited a little bit too long before I took my eyes off of that. I do enjoy it though. Like, I've gotten to where I can consistently, propagate my maples, and I love that. It's like a nice win whenever you look and you see roots coming out of a cutting. It's like, yeah, I did something good. Like, that's awesome. It's a good feeling. And you probably see progression in your skill set a little bit quicker in that realm than you do necessarily on a design or something that doesn't turn out well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, from my point of view, like the horticulture is the foundation. So like your natural instinct to just try to grow trees healthy, that is a really valuable skill, and you really can't do the other two. Like you can't start pruning stuff or, well, I mean, you can, but it might slow the tree down a lot. Right. So I think that's a very common thing to start out with the horticulture side of things, or the growing side of things. And I think it's actually good too, right? You need to set that foundation. It's just, you need to kind of capture yourself and say, okay, I've been growing trees healthily for 2 years. Now I need to transition, right? I've proven that I know that I have the foundation. Now I need to push myself, right? And it sounds like that's kind of your kind of thought process.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So you mentioned you've been doing this for 4 years, but you kind of talked about this like getting serious moment. So, what was the catalyst for that shift? Like, was there some specific thing that popped up that caused you to go deeper into bonsai? Was it like the influence of a teacher? I'm curious, like, was it a discrete event even? Like you're like, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to plan and write all these things down in a journal or whatever, or like a goals tracking sheet, or was it a little bit more like of a natural shift?
I think throughout the 4 years, I would say it's fair to say that not my interest necessarily, but my time spent on it has gone and has had peaks and valleys for sure. It's very easy in the middle of winter, when all you're doing is watering maybe once a week, in my place, I'm in North Carolina, by the way, to, just kind of fall into a lull where you're not thinking about it much, you're not doing much. But I think every time that I have entered a tree into the exhibit, I've only done it twice, but both times that I have has really been a big spark for me, because it's a goal. It's something, I'm going to take this piece that I've been staring at in my garden and I'm going to put it on display for people. And, it's also it's very easy for us when you're consuming content and you're seeing these, really talented people that are working on great material to like downplay what you have as a beginner in your garden. But when you take it to a show where a bunch of people are walking around that aren't into the hobby, and like their jaw drops even when they see your tree, and that's a really good feeling. You're like, okay, I am doing something that can evoke a reaction from people, and that's like awesome. So both shows that I've participated in have been a big spark for me. I think, there's been the last, one of the last workshops I was able to attend was Suthen. I hope I'm saying his name right. And he helped me with the design on a tree that I have. And it was a big moment for me, because it's like, wow, this is a really great trajectory that this tree's on right now. And, I'd love to get to the point where I can design a tree like that. So, most, I guess if you're looking at it, most of the sparks that I've had have been around the club, and activities around the club.
And then what did the actual kind of rededication look like? Did you take some other hobbies and kind of deprioritize them to some extent, like, or other areas of your life and deprioritize them? Or was it, did you invest more resources, get more trees? Like what did the kind of rededication look like?
I don't honestly think that I'm in it yet. I think that I've decided that I've decided I want to do it. And up to this point in my journey, I've not worked with a teacher, an instructor at all. I've, attended some club meetings because of, I have 2 kids. The weekends are tough. It's tough for me to attend club meetings. I might attend like 3 per year or so, it's really tough. So I think where I'm at right now is, okay, I've got to figure out a way to get better at this outside of the club model, because clearly that's not working for me. And that's not a knock on my club. I think it's totally normal to have events on weekends. But, the show, another great thing about this show was, I approached Dane, who I saw his trees from the ABS and, have a high level of respect for him. I'm like, man, hey, if you ever want to just hang out or, need any help with anything, just let me know. And he's like, yeah, I'll definitely hit you up. And I think that's going to be an avenue for me, not just through him, but just to try to get more social with the other members and find ways to interact with them outside of the club meetings, get into their gardens, see their trees, talk to them, ask them questions. I know, and that's kind of questions that I have for you too. Like, what would you recommend? How should I proceed? What does that teacher to student dynamic look like for a hobbyist? That's all stuff that I'm wondering right now.
Yeah. I know you had mentioned that you wanted to pick my brain a bit, so maybe we can start with that. So you're essentially asking, like, for someone that's ready to commit deeper, that might be somewhat time constrained, like, what are the biggest kind of like bang for your buck type activities or like models of engagement that you can kind of get into? Is that kind of the question?
Yeah. And maybe added on to that would be, how did you approach establishing relationships with other club members, maybe where you were able to, like, go to each other's gardens and hang out a little bit, or just get around trees and other people who love this hobby as much as we do more often?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't have kids, so definitely, stop me when you're like, okay, that's great, but that's not going to work for my situation. So, keep me grounded in that sense. But I think, so whenever I kind of made this rededication, I had had bonsai trees for many years. I was living in Oakland. I moved to Denver. I like drove a subset of my trees that I was going to keep across the country to Denver. I kind of just limped along when I was in Denver because I was living in an apartment and I literally just had like a balcony on the 10th floor where I had trees. And, winters in Denver are pretty harsh, and I was keeping trees just in the unheated garage. So that was a little bit of maintenance mode. But when I moved back to California after a year, I think probably the biggest thing that influenced my bonsai journey was when I was moving back to San Francisco, I reached out to the local club, and I forget exactly how it happened, but essentially the president of that club, I think, was Sam Tan at the time. And I think I have to go back and look at the emails or whatever at this point. But basically, I messaged him and was like, hey, I'm coming back. Like, I want to get involved. And, he just happened to say, I need like a second pair of hands for doing some repots this winter. Like, if you want to come by, I could use your help. And so, you know, just like you, I think, reached out to Dane, very similar. I guess I got lucky in that, like, the first person I reached out to said yes. And, I started working at their house. But yeah, I would go over there kind of weekday evenings or sometimes on the weekends as well. And he lives, maybe 20 minutes away from me. So I would go over there and just working hands-on with someone on like projects that were really exciting to me, like these Yamadori first repots. And Sam, I think he was a very good influence because he was ahead of me in terms of skill level, had very cool material to work on too. And then 3, he's very precise. So, he would tell me if I wasn't doing something correct. So finding someone like a friend, a mentor, that you can have those similar experiences. And then I just started, eating it up. I would go over there, every other weekend or once a week and work on projects. And it started as just repotting Yamadori trees. And I was literally just holding the trunk while he cleaned the bottom, or like helping lift it out of the pot, for example, things like that. Right. So I think your instinct of connect with club members or somebody that's, knowledgeable and convenient and has a collection that eclipses your own, I think that's a good instinct. And I think for me that played the biggest role in my journey, because A, I had suddenly this influx of knowledge, and then B, I had this inspiration of like, here's someone who has a collection that I want to aspire towards. And I'm also like fairly impressionable. So bonsai became a lot more fun to me whenever there was somebody I was doing it with, right? As opposed to just me doing it in a vacuum. And so all those things kind of came together for me. And, I think that, the other thing that had a big influence was just consuming as much online, high quality content as I could. Right. So I also at that time started treating online content as like less of entertainment and more as studying. And so I would, find some tree that I have in my garden, seek out the answer to a question like, when should I prune my juniper and how, right? And then I would go into Mirai Library or Bonsai U, and I would watch those lectures and I would take notes, and then I would take screenshots and pictures, and I would have this kind of condensed version of this 1.5-hour lecture that I would use to then kind of prompt me as I'm doing stuff on my own trees.
That's really interesting. What excites me the most about that is it sounds doable for me. I think that I have I don't think based upon what I know about the scene out there, I don't think that we have the talent that you do necessarily in the San Francisco and the Pacific area as a whole. But I think I have enough talent here for sure that it could keep me busy for a very long time. And yeah, I love that idea. I guess, like, did you find going and working on Sam's trees to be more beneficial and more, did you learn more from that, or would you take your own trees as well and like ask them questions? Was it, a mixture of both?
Early on, it was pretty much just me going over there to help him on his trees, right? I think you have to establish, like, in that kind of working relationship with someone, unless you're like paying for their time, then the second thing you described was almost like a workshop, right? Where you're bringing your tree over and getting advice. I mean, I think Sam probably would have been open to doing something like that. But at least early in the journey, I kind of felt like I need to kind of put in my dues, and like, I want to be strictly additive to his process, like just be helpful, as opposed to starting to kind of, because it's already a lot of work to teach somebody while you're doing a process. Like, yes, you might need that extra pair of hands, but it does add some additional stress and time to the process potentially to bring somebody else up to speed to doing something at the level that you're doing it at. So he probably would have been open to me bringing over things early in the journey, but initially, at least, probably the first year, I was pretty much just helping on his projects. And that started as repotting because I came back to San Francisco in the winter. And then the next year it started as during styling season, I would wire like one branch. Well, first he cut off a branch and gave me it and said, okay, do this right. And then you can actually do one on the tree. And then that kind of expanded to like, year 2, maybe I brought a tree over and like styled it and then he gave me feedback, right? And then maybe he came over and helped me on one of my projects and I helped him on his. So, I mean, obviously as you kind of develop a rapport and friendship, then, that kind of expands. But I think initially I was just working on his trees and I think that was immensely helpful in like establishing the baseline. And then I could then go and do some of those things on my own trees and see where I fell short and where I didn't. And then the next time I would come over to his house, I would like ask to do like, oh, I am on my house. I failed the kind of tie down. Like, can I discuss the tie down strategy with you before you kind of put your own stamp on it? Can I validate what I would do? So things like that, you can kind of start to use the situation as like a test bed and then kind of go and practice on your own.
Do you think, like, if you look back on it now, let's say like the first year, was it very clear to you? Did it like jump out at you how much better you were getting so much quicker from just being in that setting? Or was it more subtle?
Well, I started with repotting and I felt like fairly confident in repotting already. But Sam had a very different style of repotting and also was working on different material than I'd worked on previously. So I think initially I didn't feel like I was making leaps and bounds. I felt like I was learning a new process that was maybe more applicable to new trees. So I definitely felt progress there. It's hard for me to remember back on the beginning of wiring. I remember it being very slow. Like wiring and styling has been a like very long process for me to pick up and learn. I didn't feel like I was picking it up at like a breakneck speed. I think the main issue was I just, wasn't getting enough reps. So when I would go over to Sam's house to wire a tree, I might wire 2 branches on the back in the time that it takes him to wire the other, 7 or whatever that make up the tree. So it's just something that like wiring progress came very slowly and then like started to kind of exponentially increase over time. So I definitely felt like I was learning and developing and, I just felt like starting to push and get the momentum on that rock that is learning, especially wiring and styling. That felt a little bit slow in the beginning.
I know for me, one of the resources that I am potentially going to look into is Tyler Sherrod is a couple hours away and he does intensives at his studio. And I'm contemplating that, but I'm curious because I think you've done some at Mirai as well. Is that correct? What's that like? Is that something you'd recommend? What's the difference between an intensive versus working with a teacher? How does that different?
Yeah. Oh, that's a big can of worms. So whenever I started working with Sam, that kind of like increased my energy and inspiration and started me down the path of learning. But then I was like, okay, I want to learn some things that I don't want that aren't necessarily things you get pro bono, right? Like doing workshops and things like that, right? So, me lending Sam a hand, like that's, very beneficial for both of us. But like there were certain things that I wanted to learn that like you essentially need to take classes to do, right? And so I started looking for folks to take classes with. I had been learning with Sam and he kind of has learned within the Mirai ecosystem. And so I looked at Orion and, I applied for his wait list on his classes. That was like a multi-year process to get into those classes. So I was like, okay, well, I want to learn now. So I also reached out to Todd Schlafer because he was, had worked under Orion and learned under him. And so it was all in a similar family of learning. So I went out and started taking, I did what really I think changed my trajectory a bit was working with Sam gave me the confidence to start like actually putting some money where my mouth was and increasing my tree quality to have things to do these techniques that I learned at Sam's and Todd's. And then also spending money on like going out of state to a class in Colorado. That was a big kind of shift for me. I think naturally I'm like a pretty frugal person and I was very worried about like, what if I spend, $1,200 going to this class for, a 4-day class or whatever and all the, flights and accommodations, or, could be even more depending on where you're going. And, that's a lot of money. And like, what if it just felt a little bit risky. It was like, oh, what if I do this and I don't like it, right? But I kind of was going through a maturation and like shift in my own life where I was like, okay, I need to like put this fear to the side a little bit and start spending some money on things that I think could have a targeted impact on improving my quality of life, right? Instead of like holding the purse strings so tightly. And going to Todd's house was that first investment that I made. And I haven't looked back since. I've taken classes with Todd. I've taken classes with Andrew Robson. I've taken classes with Adam Toth, with Jonas, with Ryan. So each year I make the conscious effort to like invest and have increased my investment in education with professionals. So I think I've experienced a lot of different kind of types of classes, but almost universally, I think they're excellent. So yes, definitely make some time for classes. That was one thing that I was going to say too. Like, even if you don't have time for, doing something every weekend, I think it is a reasonable assumption that there's potentially the ability to plan a 3-day, 4-day, or a long weekend or something like that to take a class like at least once a year, right? So, I mean, obviously it's something that you need to like work out with your family and figure out, but it will have a big impact on your trajectory, and I think is a necessary step in kind of establishing an improvement in your bonsai skills.
I think what you mentioned there about having confidence going into it is a little bit of it's a question that I've been asking myself is, do I need to I don't want to, I feel like, again, like you, I'm a little, I'm on the frugal side. So I want to get the most out of an intensive if I'm going to pay for it and I'm going to go. And I feel like if I went right now and if I was that guy who could only wire one branch while everybody else was doing 5, then I'm getting 20% the experience that they are, or, my money, 20, so I know it's hard to put a line across, but like, it feels like maybe I would be better served to work with a teacher for a while before I did my first intensive. Do you think that's fair?
For me, I guess the like worth was more about like, I guess like I just didn't want to spend so much money on bonsai, right? But I think that the majority of these like credential, like any of the folks I mentioned, I'm sure I haven't taken classes with Tyler, but I'm sure he's the same way. For example, like any of these teachers that are, established in teaching in bonsai in the US are going to be able to tailor the class to your level. So I think the important thing is to come into it with concrete goals for what you want to get out of it, right? And they'll be able to help you efficiently address the kind of goals that you have, right? So if you're saying, hey, I don't know how to wire yet, maybe, your first classes are on that, right? And they'll be able to help you get from the stage that you're at to the next stage, right? And so it's less about like being, ready to like do certain things of certain tasks, and more about like, do you have a good picture of where you're at, and do you have a good picture of what the next thing is that you want to learn, or like what interests you, and being able to provide that feedback to them openly. So to me, it's less about the like how skilled you are right now, and it's more about just being realistic about what you want to accomplish and knowing that coming in, and then providing some input to the teacher and having them tailor the content to you. From what I've experienced, like almost all the teachers I've worked with in the US are really good at that tailoring the content to your level. So I wouldn't be worried about like whether it's worth it based on your skill level.
Okay. You mentioned your trees there, and that was one thing that came to mind for me is like, I'm curious how did your collection change after you started working and getting more serious about it?
Yeah, I mean, I started my collection with a lot of, growing seeds that I collected from Monterey cypresses on the outside, and like buying nursery stock trees from Home Depot that I would hack up, right? And I think that served a good kind of role for me, but my goals started to shift to, I want to get trees in the Pacific Bonsai Expo, for example, and things like that. And, if you have that goal of like meeting some specific bar, then you have to get material that has the potential to meet that bar, right? And so I have very limited space. Like I can have, maybe 16 trees on my benches. So And then I have got a bunch of little grow projects. I still haven't gotten fully away from that, but
They're
my
fun.
growing tendencies, yeah, the potential is limitless.
Yes.
But I very quickly, whenever I did the kind of doubling down, I started to be ruthless with getting rid of trees that, even if they have sentimental value, like, oh, my dad got me this one when he was visiting. Like, if there wasn't a future for that tree within the context of my goals of developing skills in a specific species, like I've kind of dedicated myself to Shimpaku and redwoods, or if it didn't have a future as a tree that could get into the Pacific Bonsai Expo, then I started to rotate out those trees. So kind of just naturally, I've sold off the lower value trees and I only bring in trees that meet some specific quality bar, or try to, right? I'm not perfect, but we all get distracted sometimes. But that's been the main transition, has been reducing my collection to trees that actually align with my goals.
Do you seek advice from your teachers or people that you look up to when you're buying material?
100%,
Yeah, okay.
100%. I'd say
That's
that
another factor right now. Is like I don't trust myself to spend significant money on something because I don't, again, I don't know exactly what I'm looking for. And my eye's not really good yet.
Yep, 100%. I mean, I still have that challenge today. I'd say, like, for me, I mean, I don't even know how many years I am into it now. Nine years into bonsai. Like, I just feel like I'm able to start saying like, okay, that is a good version of that. And I think that just comes from experience. But for the 8 years prior to this, like, I had that same struggle of like, is that a good one of those? And should I be spending, like, is it worth $900, right? That's a big chunk of change to blow on a tree. So a lot of my collection was focused on like things that I could get at a good deal, right? And I think that's a natural kind of thing to experience. And I think it takes a long time to develop that, like, oh, this is a good version of this tree and I should spend the money on it. I think one thing that can help with that is specializing, right? I don't have to know, is this a good version of every tree? I just need to know, is this a good version of a redwood or a Shohin juniper, right? And so you start to see, like, have these at-bats with like, oh, should I purchase this one? Should I purchase this one? And then you think back in your memory bank, like, oh, that was actually the best one I saw. I should have purchased it, even if it was a little bit of a premium. It demands that premium because it's a better tree. But up until you get to that point, then I think like 100%, like, rely on those that have further developed that than you to make those purchase decisions. So I'm always like asking Adam whenever we're at a local auction or whatever, like, what do you think about this tree? Should I buy that? Like, you don't really know the potential of something until you know like what you can actually enact on it, right? And so when you don't have that sense of like taking a tree from raw to 6 years down the line, it's hard to get that sense until you've actually done it, right? And so it can be hard to know like how good or bad a tree is when you don't actually know what you can even do to it yet. So relying on people who have more experience doing to give you the feedback is good.
Well, I know that I'm sitting here grilling you, and it's your podcast, so I don't want to. But I can ask you questions all day, man. I really appreciate this. This is all good stuff for me, and hopefully
No, for
somebody
sure.
out there is listening.
Hopefully
to it.
helpful.
Yeah.
And then that's just my experience. I'm
Sure.
not, the end all be all, but hopefully some of that resonates with you or like helps you make decisions in your own process. Cool. So I was very curious about what your actual day job is and how we can kind of tease some things out of that might be applicable to bonsai. So can you tell me about tell me what you do, and then, specifically about the community building aspect of it. Would love to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. So, I work for a AAA game publisher, and I manage a community team. The team's made up of community managers. I know it's a lot of word salad going on here. Welcome to corporate America, I guess. But yeah, community managers. There's a video editor, and then there's community developers on the team. And really, I think maybe one way of kind of breaking it down that's digestible is like, if you're looking at a video game and the way that a video game is marketed, and community does fall under the marketing umbrella. It's not, but it's a little bit of a different approach. So the marketing approach is hey, there's a new video game. Check out this really cool cinematic trailer, these CGI effects. Like this is, loud music, cutscenes, blah, 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 blah. And the community approach for promoting maybe a new piece of content in a game would be, hey, here's this new hero. You're already playing this game. You love this game. Here's some footage of how this new hero is going to change the game that you love. And here's how your game's going to look different because of this new piece of content that's coming into the game. And we speak maybe more fluent with what the players are experiencing in games. So we have to know our stuff enough to know, like, this new hero is coming with this ability and it's going to have this effect, and these are the effects that it can have down the line. And we try to get the players to start thinking about that and how this new content is really going to be exciting for them to get their hands on. So hopefully that kind of demonstrates the difference between, marketing and community. What we want to do in community is, if somebody's out there and they love our game, they love spending time playing it, and they also want to interact with it in other ways, that we are there to help them do that. We're fostering them, getting into influencer communities or, streamers they like. We are, always putting out content on our social channels that are, not only, marketing, but just, UGC, user generated content. If somebody does a cool play, we'll reach out to them like, hey, can we share this? And just showing stuff like that. So just trying to do whatever we can to establish like a deeper connection with our players and take somebody from, who may be playing once a week and give them a reason why they might want to play 2, 3, 4 times a week.
Makes a lot of sense. So what are the main platforms that you're interfacing people on then? Like I've seen, I don't know if this is the role that you're describing, but like I've seen community managers in Discord, for example, like for the official Discord for Game X, like, oh, there's a community manager who helps bring feedback from players to the dev team, or like helps announce different features that are coming out, just like you described, or helping update the dev blog. So like, I'm assuming it's Discord. You mentioned like socials, so people are interacting through Twitter and YouTube and things like that. But are those kind of the core, or like, I guess, forums if they exist for the specific game? But like, what kind of platforms are you interfacing with people through?
Discord is definitely a big one. And the great thing with Discord is that who you're talking to. Like, they're there for a reason. They're there because they like the game. Very few people are going to enter a Discord for a game that they don't own. And so that's a fun platform to engage with. But yeah, obviously Twitter, Instagram, TikTok's really big. YouTube Shorts is, a big area of focus. But ones that are really becoming juggernauts is Steam, and the way that we interact with players on Steam. It's again, it's another platform where players who are on Steam and looking at things on Steam are getting ready to play a game. Like, they're booting up their PC and they're getting ready to play a game. So we want to be there. We want to be talking to them. We want to give them reasons to check out our page and make sure that we are interacting there. So yeah, those are really the big platforms.
Yeah. I feel like community management is so difficult because, traditional marketing, the genuineness and I guess it's all important, and I'm curious on your perspective, but I definitely have seen, people not always be grateful, and like, you're right there on the front line with them. Especially gamers can be very salty sometimes. So you have to balance that act of like genuineness and building a real community with also, you have the goals of the marketing that you're doing, right? That you're trying to balance too. So I'm sure that's a kind of a challenging tightrope to walk.
For sure. Yeah. You got to have thick skin. You have to, it makes everything, it all is so much easier if you're coming from a place of passion. Like, I love this game that I'm working on. It makes everything easier because you're already kind of familiar with the community if you've gotten to that point, and you know what to kind of expect. And it just makes it easier to kind of interact. A lot of, it's not something that I necessarily advocate for, because, work-life balance is important, but it's very common in the community side that where we're passionate about the games that we're on. So for us to check Twitter is something that we would normally do anyway. and we're in the ecosystem of the games that we're playing, and we're seeing stuff that happens just naturally. It's not even like a work thing, like, oh, I got to check Twitter to see what the conversation's like there. It just happens because we're already in that community to start with. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely toxicity in live service games, and how popular they've gotten over, the last 10 years is something of a challenge. Are we meant as players and as community managers to cover the same game for 10 years? That if you would have told gamers that 20 years ago, they would have had no concept of that. World of Warcraft and all that kind of ushered in this live service era. And now you've got people, devs, whoever, that have been working on games for 10 years. And if you're a creative person, I'm not saying this is the case, but I could definitely see where you're like, okay, I got into this because I want to be creative, and here I am. I want to work on a different project, and I want to do something else. And as a player, it's like, okay, I love this game, and I'm the reason that I'm in this community is because I'm passionate about it. But when you get to a point where you've been playing a game for 10 years, it's very easy to see everything that's wrong instead of those original reasons that you fell in love with it. And so learning that as a community manager, it is something that is a skill, and you have to just kind of take everything with a grain of salt and know that for every toxic person out there, there's 100 people that are really appreciating what you're doing to, establish that deeper connection.
Totally. I'm very curious on your thoughts for how we bring community building to Bonsai, because, we have obviously clubs, and that's like a big community building thing, but at least for our club, that's a once a month kind of activity that happens for a few hours. And then there are some online communities. I think you see kind of groups built up around Bonsai Mirai, for example, and their forums and live videos, as well as Bonsai U, but there's not a bunch of like bonsai discords out there. What do you think the path forward is for bonsai for community building? Do you think we're missing something?
I've thought about that a lot. It's something that I'm really interested in, and it's something that I would love to be able to contribute to in some way. Whenever I look at like my long-term bonsai goals, one of them is I would really like to kind of bring together the Eastern community of bonsai enthusiasts, especially in the North Carolina region. I think that we are a sleeping giant here for the scene. I think it just needs a little bit more manicuring, I guess you could say. So this is something that I'm thinking about a lot. I think the first thing that I would say is, if we're looking at how do we improve on getting new bonsai enthusiasts to establish that deeper connection quicker, you got to meet them where they are. And what that means to me is people are going to be like me. They're going to get a tree, and then they're going to get on YouTube and look at how to take care of it. This is still a DIY hobby for the most part. People who are buying their first tree don't really know that there's people who do 6-year apprenticeships in Japan, that there's teachers. They probably don't even know there's clubs, to be honest with you. So they're going to get on YouTube, and they're going to look for content that's going to help them try to learn how to keep this alive. The question that I would ask is, and that I'm really curious about, is not necessarily about that first tree, but what is it that we can do to increase the odds of people getting their second tree? If anybody can go stop at a van on the side of the road and pick up one tree, and then they put it on their windowsill and it dies in a month and they never interact with it again. But if we can get people to get like the second tree, I think that is a moment where you're like, okay, something went from I saw it on Karate Kid and I took the opportunity to something happened, and now I'm wanting to do this more. And you can listen back to this podcast and all the episodes. I think one of the common denominators there with people is they met some type of bonsai ambassador, somebody that they met early in their journey that gave them good advice, and that really pulled back the curtain a little bit to show them, hey, this is your tree, that's awesome, but there's a whole world out here. And did you know that you can make bonsai out of wisteria? You can do, all this, stuff. There's flowers there, they pull back the curtain a little bit to open up the doors. So, I think two things that I kind of look at here is if you're somebody who's enthusiastic about bonsai and you have the opportunity to talk to somebody new about it, do that. And you never know what type of difference you'd make. If I hadn't have met Ken and gotten, and he hadn't taken the time to talk to me for an hour, I don't know if I would have established that deeper connection. Going to his garden and seeing the variety of trees made me want to go home and get more trees. And that's where I got my second tree, So that's a big thing there. And then I think that we need more people making more content on YouTube. And, I can give you a little bit of an example here. If you open up an incognito tab on Google Chrome and go to YouTube and type in building juniper pads, how to build pads on a juniper, and look at the videos that come up. There's a lot of videos on there, and I'm not discrediting any of them. There's a lot of great advice on there, but the best video I ever watched on it was a 2-hour-long video of Peter T making a presentation to the Golden State Bonsai. I don't know if I'm getting that right, but that is by far the best video I've ever seen on the subject. And I would be willing to bet that you're not going to find that on the first 5 pages of those search results. So, I'm not saying that necessarily needs to be on the front page or that Peter T needs to make his own video and do SEO better. What I'm saying is that if one of the first results there is I looked at their channel. They've uploaded, I think, 5 times in the last 2 years, and if we're talking about building a community, we need that person who just got that first tree to look up advice, find a tree, and then if they can get with a creator who's going to be uploading regular content, maybe 1 video per week, they're going to be getting in that repetition. Maybe that person has a Discord. They get in there and they meet people in their Discord, or they meet people in the comments of the video. They see they actually get into a community that way. And if these people on their first tree are getting into like just that generic kind of video that was made maybe 5-6 years ago, not that can't be good and that can't be good advice, but if you were asking me for from a video game community builder, I would much prefer them to get their first help video from an active content creator who's streaming and making regular content, because they're going to get actually injected into a community there and have people around them that are supporting the hobby regularly, than just a one-off where they see one video and then that channel never uploads again for 6 months. Who knows if they're even still playing? Does that make sense at all? I know I went a bit.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
The thing I struggle with a little bit on that is there is really good knowledge out there in the digital form, right? But it's in these kind of walled gardens to some extent, right? Like in Bonsai Mirai and Bonsai U, which, these people need to make money and support their livelihood. So that makes sense. And I think both of these platforms publish things on YouTube, right? But so, maybe those are the existing things. I don't know that either of those creators are like Bjorn and Ryan, for example, are creating like content that's supposed to be like viral, I guess. Like, I think Bjorn, I have to double check on YouTube, but maybe actually, I don't know lately. Last time I had checked, he had like around 100,000 subscribers, which is a lot, right? But there's other bonsai influencers out there that potentially have less schooling and skill in bonsai, but have similar or more followers, right? So I don't know that the content for these bonsai folks is as viral. I don't know if that's in the context of them, like bonsai is just not as viral or just not as popular in general, or if that happens because they're not targeting their content to the masses, right, in the correct way. So I don't know what the cause of that is, but do you think, you've seen some of that content, like, they have their own goals for their platforms, but I'm curious, like, if you're saying like, hey, we need a better on-ramp for new people, do you think that folks that have these existing platforms should somewhat change what their content looks like in terms of like moving from videos to shorts or creating more visually appealing content, or I don't know what it is, right? But do you think that these people who have these platforms and the skills need to change their approach?
I don't think they need to change their approach, especially if we're talking about, Mirai or Bjorn, especially. Like, I think that element of the premium content being behind a paywall it puts us in a different situation than a lot of other online communities out there. If a video game creator tried to do that, that would not be received very well. Okay. I think it's perfect in Bonsai though, because basically you get what you pay for. And again, I think this is where it kind of opens the door up to other people to create, and they shouldn't be afraid to create, in my opinion. The more content that's out there, the better. Like, people need to be critical. I know that that's a skill that's learned over time, but we've been online long enough as a society to where, like, for the most part, not everything you watch online is absolutely true. If I'm watching a video about somebody and, a lot of times the comments are going to be your truth factor there. Not that they're always right, but like, you can kind of get a sense pretty quickly about people when they know what they're talking about or when they don't. But like the premium content there with Bonsai U and everything else, like, that's when you get to the point where you're taking it serious enough and you want to pay for it, that's there, and that's high quality content, and I think that makes complete sense. But if you look at Marai's channel, I mean, Ryan's most viewed video is how to make a bonsai. That's the title of it. The views on YouTube are with beginners, and there's a lot of views out there. And I think that smartly, they both, to some degree, use that stuff as a funnel to their premium content. And that's perfect. You got the on-ramp of the new content for the beginner. And then, hey, by the way, I have this aspect and this library of videos for you if you want to go further. And that makes complete sense to me. Another channel that I'll mention here that I think is a really great model for what we could use more of in the community is Bonsai and Eric Schrader, what he does over there. I mean, you think about him. He supports people at every step of the journey. And it doesn't matter how far along you are in your journey. If you're a beginner, he's got lots of content on there. It's how I found him, is like, and not only that, he also does a lot of content where he's working with material that looks like what you have as a beginner. And that's where, Marai and stuff like that can get a little bit out there. Sometimes you can't really relate with the material that you see them working on, very often, at least not on public facing stuff. I don't know what the premium content looks like, but on Bonsai, he's always working with, not always, but he's very commonly working with young material, talking about development. He talks a lot about development because he has a grow operation. If you are new and you want that material, you can actually buy it from him, and I don't know what it's like for him to ship it to the East Coast. I haven't tried that, but I'm assuming it works. I'm pretty sure that's an option. So you can actually buy it from him. And then if you get to the point where, like, your goals are to get in the expo, and that's something that he's, part of, and that he's really driving. So, I mean, he's like a force multiplier, if that makes sense. Like, somebody like that can support people at every part of the journey. And because he does so much onboarding content, he gets players into his funnel. Or not players. He gets us into his funnel early on, and we stay there because the content is relevant at every step. We don't outgrow him.
Yeah, I still learn all sorts of stuff from Eric. I love his content as well. I just actually had recorded an episode with him yesterday, so that'll be coming out soon.
Awesome. But looking forward to that.
Yeah, he's a treat. That's interesting. So you've named some kind of canonical examples of this. How do we know if it's saturated or not? Like you said, we need more of these kind of channels. Like, how do you know we need more? Or like, how do we define the need for more? Like, if there's one good example, is that enough? Like, as long as somebody hits that one, I guess how do you decide if you need more or not?
That's a great question, because the unfortunate reality is, like, for somebody like me, okay, why don't I make more? I mentioned I made a couple of videos early on with my son, but I haven't made any videos in a very long time on the subject of bonsai. So why am I not doing that? And I think there's a part of that is like, okay, what can I do in a video that's going to help somebody more than just saying, go to Bonsai Marai and watch their videos, or go to Bonsai U and watch, what can I do? And the reality is that the way that the algorithms work and the way that YouTube's work, the YouTube's works, is that the algorithm is going to favor newer content over the older content if it's getting the same type of watch time, click-through rate, and it's hitting those metrics. So I think that this the part that maybe is the mountain and the struggle here is that there really isn't, I don't think there's enough views in Bonsai to make a full-time living just off of YouTube views. I may be wrong about that. Maybe there's people who are doing it. I guarantee you there's people who are making good revenue from their YouTube channels. But actually, like in the gaming space, you're talking multimillionaires just from YouTube revenue. So I don't think we have those type of views. But if you're a bonsai professional out there and you're not making content and looking at that YouTube as a funnel, in my opinion, that's a mistake. That's where I think we could do more of it. And granted, if you've already got the number of clients you want, if you've already got everything good, you're happy with the amount of money you're making, more power to you. You don't have to do anything. But if you're trying to grow and you're not making content or meeting players where they are, in my opinion, that's a mistake. And that's where we could really use more of it. But I also don't think that we should put our nose up in the air to people who are just casual hobbyists and are like, hey, I've been doing bonsai for a year. This is what I've learned. And hope that you don't make the same mistakes I did. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, that's something that I've struggled with is like, I really have a passion for like helping people learn. And when I was kind of the first iteration of that was, I was like posting reels on my Instagram, like, here's like, how you do this and here's how you do that. But I found that like, Instagram was not like reels was not it's not like a great format to like actually teach somebody something. You're not going to learn a ton in 30 seconds, right? The content has to be like visually appealing and it has to be like punchy to hold their attention for a long time. People aren't going to like watch a lecture on Instagram. And then the other thing was, I very quickly was like, what right do I have to teach people, right? Like, I don't even know that much. So, or like, I might think I know something, but I'm actually only at level 1 and there's like 3 layers to this, right? So that was something that I struggled a little bit with content creation was like, hey, like what medium is actually right for to teach someone bonsai? And then 2, I didn't feel like I had the necessary knowledge or credentials or whatever, right, to be able to do that genuinely. So you had talked a little bit about like maybe not turning up our nose on folks that are earlier in the journey or giving out maybe less credentialed information, but can you expand on that a bit?
Yeah, I think that it's very easy to fall into the YouTube trap of, I have a YouTube channel and I want to get as many views as possible. So I'm going to be very clickbaity. And that's where you end up with, video titles like, I don't know, like, I almost killed this tree and now it's it's this, or like some like really knee-jerk reactions and stuff like that. But what about the path of, I'm going to document my journey and I'm going to talk about my experiences and what I learned from it. And if that helps you, amazing. But if it doesn't, then that's okay too. You know what I mean? And it takes a more nuanced approach. And again, the reason I mentioned the kind of YouTube trap is because what YouTube wants you to do is get on there and be like, here's 5 things that you can do to have, Pacific Bonsai Expo tree tomorrow. That's what they want you to do. And it's very easy to fall into that trap whenever you do have one video that maybe pops off a little bit and you're like, okay, that worked. How do we do that again? And then you're making content that fits a title, not that is just, genuine. Does that make sense?
100%.
But like, I really don't think, if you're coming at it from an honest approach of, I'm on my journey, I'm going to document it, I'm going to talk about what I'm learning along the way, and I hope that you learn something from it. I don't think that anybody should be ashamed if they make a mistake. Like, hey, I talked about this and it turns out that I had a bug infestation. It wasn't because I was overwatering. And, I learned from that. Like, I don't know. I just feel like that's just kind of like and that's like the age that we're in today. Is almost like the video journal of our journey into this hobby. Like what's wrong with that? As long as we're not trying to like clickbait too bad, or like, trying to like be the ultimate authority, or come off with more authority than what we actually have, I don't see anything wrong with that honest approach.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's hard. I mean, it's a hard line to walk as well, right? Because you have to have some amount of clickbaitiness, or,
Yeah.
the content might not get any traction, right? But yeah, I think that makes sense. I think it's hard for people to find what their genuine niche is, and then you got to do it for a long time before, you potentially grow enough for it to be actually worthwhile, right? I mean, for me, the podcast has felt really genuine to, like, I'm just having the conversations with people that I am interested in, and like asking them questions about what I'm interested in, and like people happen to also find those things interesting, so it works, right? But I think there's like some luck involved in the things that you're interested in also being interested to other people, and kind of being able to keep up that. The podcast is fairly low lift, right? Like, I record for a few hours, and then it takes me probably less than the recording time to actually do the editing and posting. So it's been pretty sustainable. But I think for people like bonsai professionals, it's a little bit of a rat race to like have your full-time job and then also have to be able to pumping out this content consistently. And so I think that's what leads to some of these channels where it's like, oh, there's been one video posted in the last 6 months and stuff like that, right? It's just a lot of work, right? So, and
Yeah,
a lot of these bonsai businesses are very bootstrapped, right? So
sure. And if they're happy with their current customer levels and everything and income, then that's totally fine. That makes sense to not take on the burden of a lot of content. But I know how I mentioned getting the community together on the East Coast, North Carolina specifically. Why do I know more names in California and Portland than I know in North Carolina? Like, it's because they make content. It's because that's where they meet me, where I was at in my bonsai journey. And I can name, all those people over there. And the way that the first time that I heard Tyler Sherrod's name was on the Bonsai Wire podcast. And partly that's my fault. Maybe I'm not tuned in to the point where I should have known about him before that, but that's the honest truth. So, it works as far as getting exposure out there. And, at the end of the day, it kind of comes back to the same thing with video games. We're really like trying to just establish that deeper connection, because eventually we want them to end up feeling like subscribing to Bonsai U is a good investment for them. That's where we want them to end up. And I think, a big part of that is getting them to the club. That's probably like the first hurdle. And, how many times in your podcast do you talk about the club? So if somebody stumbles onto your podcast, they're going to learn very quickly that a club is a big influence and something that they should look into. And that's a huge win. I think clubs should look at making content. Like, clubs are always looking for new members. What would be wrong with once a year a club, putting out, hey, we pulled our members. Here's the top 5 tips that we have for beginners, or here's the top 5 cultivar, species that we recommend for beginners. By the way, we meet every month on this. Come and check us out. Like that should absolutely be a thing, I think, from clubs, because we want to get players, or we want to get people there. That's a big thing. So
100%.
Getting the clubs to meet them out there is big.
Yeah, I think that's definitely hitting the nail on the head, where it's like a lot of clubs, at least in California, are really legacy clubs. Like, the board is made up of retired folks, and it's just not, they don't have the same literacy to come out here and like make algorithm pleasing online content. I'm definitely not an expert at it, but even within my club, like, we've been trying to get a little bit more digitally savvy. Like, we started running ads, for example, for events on Facebook and things like that, and Instagram for reels for our show and in our auction events. And that's been really successful, actually. The thing that we struggle with a little bit is like, we've been trying to improve our live stream for our videos, or for our meetings that we do. And we've been getting better and better each year, which has been awesome, with better audio equipment and better video. And like, we're getting to a place where it's pretty good. But, now you have to have a board position that's going to edit the video and then post it on YouTube and like do that consistently, right? So it's just a aspect of like, we got to have that person that's willing to do that, right? And so that's kind of the barrier to entry is one. I think as we see digital literacy and the demographic that does bonsai increase over time, we're going to see a lot more opportunities for great content out there. So I think that's because that's instantly scales the bonsai content immeasurably, right? Whenever you've got 50 clubs across the country posting new content and creating communities and bringing their in-person communities to online. So definitely like a call to action for clubs around like, hey, I know it's a lot of work, but maybe it's worth doing that to help the hobby grow.
And what better first video for a person to stumble onto? Because, one of the things on YouTube these days, at least, is that there is a geographical preference in the algorithm. It's more weighted for like news and stuff like that, but it's there. And so if you have a club putting out content and they're near where you're viewing the video, it'll boost that a little bit in the algorithm. So imagine stumbling on that as your first video and you're like, oh, there's a meeting next weekend. I can go and ask. And then you show up there and, you're surrounded by, people and welcoming. And everybody I've ever met at a club meeting has been super friendly and welcoming. So I just can't imagine a better onboarding experience. That's not to say that I don't think that clubs could do more to cater to new people, but it's definitely a better landing spot than a lot of the other content out there.
Totally. I feel like I've been interrogating you, so hopefully this hasn't been too intense. The information's been really, really interesting, though. I really appreciate you giving your thoughts. One more thing on this that I wanted to ask you about is what kind of content you think is effective or relevant for bonsai? It's a unique medium. I guess whenever I look at analogs, I'm thinking like, oh, like artists will post reels that show like their them drawing and like the time lapse of drawing over time, for example, right? Like, what do you think the analog is for bonsai content that's going to be compelling, maybe in short form and then also in long form?
That's a really tough question. I mean, I mentioned earlier, like the views, the easy to get views are definitely in really beginner content. There's just no doubt about that. But that might not be what you want to make. I totally get somebody like, as a more advanced person wanting to talk about what they're interested in at the time. And that's why I really think podcast, and I think that bonsai as a hobby punches way above its weight as far as quality of podcasts that are out there for the hobby. Like many people, I've had multiple hobbies. I've never found as many good podcasts around a hobby as I have within bonsai. So I think that is definitely one that speaks to me, the fact that I can listen to it while doing work, and that it kind of comes back to, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to help somebody? Because that's a different piece of content there. Or are we just trying to establish that deeper connection? The podcasts do that for me 100%. Just meeting the different personalities within the scene and seeing what all is out there is something that does that. I think that short form, for the most part, when I think of short form, I'm thinking vertical video, YouTube Shorts, Instagram, TikTok. I think it can be a really good way to grow an audience and grow a brand. But in my opinion, it's best served as a funnel, in the sense of you can't tell a complete story. First of all, we're in a graphic hobby that is beautiful. Do you really want to show it vertically? Like, is showing it vertically like the best way to show it? And I don't doubt that you can get beautiful footage out there, but like, I don't know, like the brain rot TikTok personality, quick edits and stuff like that just doesn't seem to fit the vibe here as much as longer form, taking your time to if you're talking about a topic, something that, taking your time to really flesh it out. I mean, that kind of brings me back to podcasts, but yeah, I mean, using the short form vertical as a funnel towards a brand, whether it's a website or whether it's your YouTube channel or whether it's your club, totally makes sense to me. But I just don't know that. Well, I don't know that I've ever watched it and thought about it the next day, really. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not something that leaves a deep impression on me. but it is something that I consume a lot of. So there's views there, certainly. I guess it depends on what you're trying to do. If you're a bonsai professional out there trying to funnel people to your website, like short form, you'll get in front of more people. Having beginner friendly content on YouTube, you're going to get views there. Are they ready to invest in an intensive? Maybe not, but you'll be on their radar. If you're a hobbyist and you just enjoy making content, then document your journey, show what you're going through. Like I think there's no really one size fits all answer to that question, I don't think.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's really has to be tailored to your goals. I found that because I've gone through a lot of different types of content creation around bonsai, and the thing I was always seeking was connection, right? And I don't think I have like any special podcasting skills per se, but the podcast has like felt the most natural to me in terms of forming connections with people out of anything that I've done in the past. So I think it does, like, you might want to, if folks are thinking about creating content in the bonsai scene, they might want to try a few different mediums and a few different types of things and see like what feels the most natural to them, and like really think about what their motivations are, right? Maybe if you're trying to get the most views and trying to make money, to do full time, like maybe you will rely more on like short form content, right? If you're trying to sell your bonsai artwork, like maybe you need to create an Instagram that has like a portfolio essentially feel to it to advertise your trees. So I think there's like different avenues for different folks, but it's very interesting to hear. And I think a good call to action to say, hey, we're all a part of this community. And if you do have that energy and want to create content, then like try a few different things out and try to show up genuinely and use it as a funnel to bring more people into this beautiful hobby. Or
yeah,
beautiful
I think you
guess.
just worded what I was trying to say for like the last 20 minutes way better than I did. Yeah, I totally agree with all that. At the end of the day, like if you're somebody out there, it can be easy to get a little bit discouraged by seeing like top level talent on Instagram just doing this beautiful work on this amazing material, or like sometimes like you can fall into like traps where like everything's Yamadori and you're like, I've never even touched one. Like so then them stumbling on your channel where you're like, hey, here's my, first year progress. That might be like exactly what they need to be like, all right, okay, I'm on track here. There's people out there like me, and this is exactly what I needed to see to keep going.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I like that. And I think you asking me the questions today was kind of funny because it made me think back on like, oh yeah, what was my mindset 4 years ago? And I enjoyed that a lot. So I appreciate you asking those questions. I wanted to ask you one more thing. What would be the template for someone trying to, like, what would you subscribe to someone or prescribe to them? I mean, for someone that wants to have a community around their YouTube channel or their podcast or their online platform or their club in the bonsai ecosystem, like what's the, bootstrapped set of things they should be doing in kind of this may be getting too complicated, but in like kind of stack ranked order of like, oh, first thing you should do is have a website or have a Discord or create short form content to funnel people. Is there kind of like a prescription that you think would be like generally applicable to bonsai community building?
I think it's different between a couple of things there that you mentioned, and maybe starting with the club setting, I think that there's a couple things there that I would throw out that could be improved upon, but maybe some clubs are doing it. Again, I don't have a lot of experience outside of the Triangle Bonsai Society that I'm a member of, but people like me, I mentioned it earlier, like sometimes we're busy on the weekends. So how can you cater to those people more without sacrificing your in-person event and your in-person meeting? I'm sure there's ways to do that through streaming and stuff like that you've mentioned. It sounds like your club is taking advantage of those. That would be really, really big first steps. I think that clubs should look at having like new member ambassadors. Like as a designated role. It doesn't have to be a board seat or anything like that, but like have like 3 or 4 people that are designated new member ambassadors. Like if a new member shows up, you point them their direction. You're like, here's one of our new member ambassadors, and they're going to talk to them. They're going to like, kind of break the ice a little bit. And also maybe be like somebody that they could like text or something like, hey, I've got this question, can I lean into here? I also think that new people at clubs, I keep saying players, it's crazy. I think that new people at clubs should be encouraged to bring trees to every meeting. I think that if they show up to a meeting without a tree, they should feel naked, because again, what's that spark gonna really what's one of those sparks is seeing other trees. So you show up as a new member, you bring your tree, and other members are gonna like come and say, hey, that looks nice. Like, for the most part, everybody's positive, at least for one comment before they start tearing your tree apart, but you'll see other stuff, and you'll get like actionable help rather than just showing up to a club meeting and there's a demonstration that goes on, again, on material maybe that's out of reach for you right now. And like, how much are you really getting from that? Like, I think those are things that could really help with new member onboarding at the club level. I think in the digital space, and this could apply to clubs too, I think the Discord platform that we mentioned has a ton of potential. And I know it's more coded towards a younger audience, but that's okay. But having some type of platform there where you're like, this is my Discord and we have different channels set up. We just go in there, we hang out, we talk bonsai all day. If you have a question, you can throw it in here. Like that's such a huge community building aspect. And I think the other thing is look on an individual level, look at the different ways that you're fostering that deeper connection for people. I mentioned Bonsai as a good example there, and what he's doing. Like every step of the way, he is there to support a person on their journey. And as a YouTuber, the way that I built up my community was I wasn't the best player necessarily, but I was totally immersed in the game, and I made a lot of content about it. I set up a Discord. The Discord ended up with, I think, over 10,000 members at one point. And if you loved the game that I covered, then you wanted to be in my community because it gave you an outlet to interact with other people 24 hours a day, whether it was consuming my content or going in the Discord and meeting players. You would see people in there that are currently in the game playing. You could hop in with them and party up. It gave people a way to interact with this hobby that they care about consistently. And I think we could apply those same things to bonsai in the scheme of what meeting people where they are and having outlets for them to. You know how it is when you get addicted, it's all you can think about and you want to interact with it as much as possible. So I'm listening to your podcast while I'm driving to work. I have your Discord pulled up while I'm at work and I'm just chatting with people on the side. Whenever I go home, I'm watching your video on how to develop young junipers. And then I'm going to wire my cuttings my 3-year-old cuttings up. Like that's how you really build a dedicated community around you. And it's a lot of work. But that would be my best advice.
I love it. I think the advice around community building is really helpful for folks. I've thought about doing some of that stuff with the podcast. I think some of the challenges right now, it's fairly low lift. I can kind of just do it for me and it's sustainable. And like, that is, if I'm going to start posting reels with each week, it's like, okay, I've got to start paying for the paid version of my recording software where I can get the video out, right? Because I can't just post audio clips on shorts, I guess. And then it's like, okay, these are now with each episode, there's an additional 2 hours of work, right? And so it's just adds complexity, but definitely could be sometime in the future, it could be an expansion of the podcast. We'll see.
And I think,
I really appreciate the expertise and guidance.
I think that you being consistent on your upload schedule and everything is the most important. If you're looking at the long term, trying to grow a brand via content, you've got to be consistent, and making it low lift enough to where you can be consistent is the most important thing. So I wouldn't sacrifice that if I were you for trying to try a new technique that might get you more views. You got to be able to do it and pull it off every week first and foremost.
Yeah. It's fun to think of the like, hey, maybe when I do have more time, how would I expand it? And this is a really helpful blueprint for that. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, that's just keep up the good work, like, and you're going to be fine. You've got a really good trajectory going. The growth will be exponential as well. Once you get more subscribers showing up every week, it's going to snowball. So just keep it going.
Cool. Thank you, Dillon. I really appreciate you taking the time. This has been a blast for me. We got into some nitty gritty here for community building and bonsai. So hopefully it was helpful for you as well. If people want to follow along on your journey, do you post any bonsai content anywhere, or are you a little bit stealth mode right now?
I have a YouTube channel, but I haven't uploaded to it in a couple of years. I'd say the most relevant platform would be Apex Bonsai 446 on Instagram. That's probably where I post pictures of my trees and stuff there pretty regularly. So yeah, that would probably be the most active place. And then the YouTube channel is just it's Apex Bonsai, but again, haven't uploaded there in a while. I think I took a bunch of pictures from the show. I might put those together and actually put that up because I need to take my own advice here and just document my journey. And so I need to get back into it.
Yeah, be the change that you wish to see.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate it again, Dillon. This was a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to staying connected for many years to come as we're both kind of driving for improvements in bonsai. One last question though for you is like, what's your goal for the next year? A year from now, where do you want to be? Is there some specific skill you want to have? Is there like you want to have taken your first intensive? What's on the docket?
I think that a good goal for me in the next year would be to have established a network here where at least once a week I can interact with somebody else who loves doing bonsai and that I can pick up some information from or interact with, whether that's going over to their place or them coming over to mine or just texting back and forth with some questions. Like, I think setting up that network for me is going to be really important. I would love to get a regular teacher in there, but that's, might be a little bit out of my control. I don't know if there's anybody surrounding me that's willing, but having that network would be what I consider to be an unattainable goal.
I love that. And I think that pays dividends not only in you learning the skill, but also in helping you with external motivation to keep improving, right? And it makes it more fun, right? Which is ultimately we're all in this to get some sort of fulfillment or fun out of doing this hobby, right? If we're not doing it as a profession. So I love that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I would actually love your help. It would be awesome to connect with some of the kind of folks that you named in North Carolina that you think are really kind of paragons of the practice out there. So I would love to have them on the podcast sometime. So
yeah,
looking forward to that.
Absolutely. I'll mention that. I'm sure there's people out here that would be willing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for everyone listening. Hope you had a good time and are inspired to contribute back to, in whatever way you can, the bonsai community and help it grow. So thank you, Dillon. And I hope everyone has a good day, good evening, and looking forward to talking to you all next week.
Thanks.